Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for taking the time to come over here instead of Tom Arbuthnot session. Again, there's time. I'm doing ChatGPT says I'm doing a session on designing and implementing effective Microsoft Teams rooms. ChatGPT wrote the title and the full abstract. I copied it verbatim, put it into the session and submitted, and it got me in. So, truth be told, I had to change a few things when I was making the deck, because you use the bullet points to kind of narrate your slides and stuff, and some of the topics were a little bit hit and miss. So I've changed a few things, changed the order. Nevertheless, it started with AI. So again, you hear this at every session you go to. Have a look at the sponsors out there. They've helped pay for the event, or actually paid for the event pretty much. And yeah, there's a lot of good stuff out there from a lot of vendors. Agenda, pretty simple. Going to tell you about me for a couple of seconds. If you don't know who I am, then you'll soon know who I am. Give you a little bit of an introduction of what I'm going to talk about, then the considerations and a bit of Q&A. Feel free to stop me anywhere if you have a burning question. I'll try and repeat it back for the recording, and then we'll get going. So about me, busy slide. So I'm solutions engineer for Logitech. Been a Teams MVP for about 4 years. Hopefully this year I'll get my 5-year chip, which can't believe that's actually gone so quickly. Blogger, podcaster. Everything I do is under the ucstatus.com or ucstatus.com now that I'm in North America. I also did podcast for No Jitter, and I've spoken at Enterprise Connect. I'm doing some stuff with Tom Arbuthnot, his Empowering Cloud, so you can find my stuff there. I've got a growing YouTube channel, and just wrote a book or a chapter in a book on the Teams kind of cookbook thing with Fabrizio Volpe, another good friend of mine. I've been doing this a long time. I started off in voice back in sort of 99, 2000 or thereabouts, doing stuff with Avaya, or it was actually Network Alchemy at the time, which eventually became IP Office, and did some stuff with there. Did LG PBXs, did you have those in the US? LG? Did you even know they made PBXs? A little bonus question, do you know what LG actually stands for? There you go. Spot the PBX engineer at the back. Thank you, Graham. Right, okay, yeah, so that's enough about me. I mean, you can find me, just Google me or Bing me or whatever, and you'll find me pretty quickly. So what's the session about? So, prior to joining Logitech about a year ago, I was working for a bunch of resellers, and the last reseller I was at was quite successful in the UK. Systems integrator, did a lot of Teams voice, contact center, and they had a meeting spaces practice. My boss worked for the meeting spaces practice, and he kind of adopted me in there. So I did all the accelerator workshops and talked to customers about how to get to Teams rooms from whatever they were using at the time. Sometimes it's a migration from Cisco, sometimes it's a migration from real legacy stuff. Sometimes it's just using nothing, a webcam and a mic on the table, that kind of thing. And there's a lot of stuff that's actually behind the scenes to actually, before you even have your first meeting. So, and a lot of people don't know that. They think you could just go buy a rally bar or whatever, plaster it to the wall, get your screen heights and things the right way. If you didn't see Adam's session, it was great. Catch the recording and look at the deck afterwards, really good. Talks a lot about that. There's a lot of other stuff that goes with it as well. So sort of over the years, I've kind of collected this top 10. ChatGPT wrote the top 10, but I actually agreed with a lot of it, and as I said, changed some of the content for the material. But that's pretty much what I'm going to talk about. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the room layout and acoustics. So rooms come in all shapes and sizes. It says, if you've already put a table and some chairs in there, you've done it kind of in a thoughtful way, hopefully, to fit the room. It was a session yesterday where somebody mentioned they put a diamond-shaped table in, and I thought, what a stupid idea is that, because you got the people on the front half of the diamond, bar or camera is behind you, and it's going to be shooting the back of your head, and really the only useful chairs are at the back of the diamond. So hopefully you've put some thought into what furniture shape and all that kind of stuff, dimensions for the size of the room, the number of chairs you want to get at it, all that kind of thing. And then you also want to make sure the camera, microphone, and speakers fit the room. We'll go into more about that. But really this is, these are stolen from Microsoft's configurator thing. I didn't put signature rooms on there because I think it's kind of a dumb idea, but I'm yet to be convinced turning a 30-person meeting room into a 7-person meeting room is good business sense, but I'm looking forward to being convinced otherwise. But nevertheless, everything from huddle right through to large, call it what you want, whether it's a boardroom, a meeting room, doesn't really matter. All shapes and sizes, and a lot of considerations when you want to try and fit this stuff out. And those are really the first 3 things. The next big thing is acoustics. And there's a bit of an echo in here. There's a big speaker there that's kind of bouncing off the walls, and you can hear what the reverberation kind of sounds like. And really the first thing you should do is try and fix your room, if possible. I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive. A lot of these solutions have echo cancellation and a bunch of other stuff in there, but why make the technology work really hard when you can just fix things with some pretty simple tricks? First thing we'll know is that architects love, and space designers love glass. They absolutely love it. They think it's the best thing ever. It's shiny, and they love it. I actually went to school for architecture. I didn't put a lot of glass in my designs, and hence I never became an architect, but so yeah, kind of a correlation there. But really, you've always seen these kind of meeting rooms. I stole this off the internet somewhere. Big glass wall, plasterboard, walls, ceilings, hard surface table, of course leather chairs that also contribute to all that kind of bouncing around stuff. And that's a terrible room. Once you put a solution in there, if you've got mic pods on the table and things, sometimes that can help with things. But if you're trying to design a room that is going to be an echo chamber, that's definitely a good example. At least they've got carpet on the floor. Sometimes you just have concrete or tiles or something in there. So they've made a modicum of effort. Glass is terrible at absorbing sound, and that's my terrible joke about the echo, but there you go. It landed. There you go. Yes. Right, so what can you do for acoustics? Well, really, a little goes a long way, really. Now, there was I've never been able to find the video again, but somebody did a demonstration of how echoes kind of work in a room with a Nerf gun. And there was basically just a Nerf gun kind of on repeat, and the sound was bouncing around and stuff. I thought it was a really great demonstration. And really what you want to do is absorb some of the sound, but also break up the sound before it can bounce off of a surface. So, cushioning on the walls, particularly cushioning on the wall with the display is a really good idea. Well, you can kind of go all out. So these are sound absorbing tiles on the walls there. It looks like a bit of a padded room, and then there's the ceiling thing. These are all kind of sound baffles and things that try and knock down that echo. And it can do a really great job, and once you've fixed the room, then you can start thinking about the other stuff. Hardware devices and compatibility. So it's a Teams conference, we're talking about Teams, and it's hard to believe that Teams is 6 years old, and there's now 12 OEMs, if you count HP and Poly as separates because they have different kind of competing room systems themselves. 12 OEMs that make Teams rooms, Windows, Android, combination of the two. So it's a really crowded space, but I think competition breeds excellence. You wouldn't have some of the great technology in any of them without some of the really great technology in someone else's. But really what you want to do is try and keep the number of vendors in a room to a minimum. You're obviously going to have things like the screen, it could be LG, Samsung, or whoever, but the MTR, don't go and buy an MTR compute from one vendor, a touch console from another, a camera from another, speakers from another, microphones from another, plus control systems from another. Suddenly you've got 12 different vendors to actually manage, and it becomes a bit of a nightmare. So if you can, try and keep it to a minimum. Pretty much all the vendors on the previous page have an end-to-end solution that works really well in pretty much any size room. Where they don't have a solution, then you can start to look at specialist stuff. So, fixing a room is all well and good, but sometimes you have a room that's slightly bigger or a little more awkward, right, to what the vendor's own solution can actually cope with. And sometimes you just want something that's a bit configurable. So that's where you go into, like Shure is out on the floor there. They do DSP-based audio. It's all network-based, and it's configurable not only in the voice pattern, so you can actually move the voice kind of microphones and deploy them where people are actually going to be talking. You can have that be used as coordinates to steer a camera, which is kind of cool. If you've got a divisible space, so this isn't one example, the big kind of, the keynote room has one of those partition walls. I can only imagine that kind of disappears into somewhere and it gets even bigger. So what you want to do is have a bit of audio in one of your 3 spaces as they're closed together. And when you're in one, the audio is pointed at the room system in room or partition A. If you open it up, then you use more of the audio. So again, you can get configurable. And those are just some examples of the pro audio that's out there that works in the Teams space. Then the other one is control. So Teams doesn't have any awareness of control. A light switch is a control. It's a basic control. You have to walk all the way to the other side of the room to actually do it. But what you can do is get really clever and actually have control systems that can do things like lower your blinds or trigger your opaque glass or lighting temperature, the actual room temperature, and a bunch of other stuff. And then not to mention, you can actually use the control to configure the different layouts. So this is a divided room, or is it an open room? Is it layout 1, 2, 3, or 4? So when you need it, you actually go to the pros and actually get some other stuff. Network infrastructure and bandwidth. So nice hot topic. Everybody thinks you just plug it in and it will work. So what do you need? Wired where possible. I think wireless is actually not even certified on MTR on Windows. So if you tell Microsoft you have a problem, they discover it's wireless, they're going to say find a cable and plug it in. Android, I don't think, has that distinction, particularly now when you have like a neat board or something, network cable, kind of trailing behind your wheelie trolley or something like that doesn't really make a lot of sense. But so wireless can kind of make sense there. But make sure if you are doing wireless, it is as good as you're wired. You need up to 4 megabits of bandwidth per endpoint. And that's for a large meeting with high fidelity, lots of video and content and things like that. It typically idles at much less than that, 1.5 meg thereabouts, or even lower. You need to access Azure AD Exchange and Teams, right? So Azure AD, so the thing can sign on. Exchange, so it can get its calendar and mailbox. And Teams, so it can attend and schedule Teams meetings. Allowing access to the required FQDNs and IP ranges and ports and protocols. So it's always the network, isn't it?
You also need SharePoint, don't you? For needing Exchange and Teams, don't you use SharePoint on Teams room?
No, this is verbatim from the Microsoft Learn page. Doesn't need SharePoint. For Surface Hub, you might need it for storage of user things, but not for MTRs, as far as I know. So this next one, the FQDNs and all that kind of stuff, and I joke that it's always the firewall. It's always, it used to be always certificates as well, but we don't have a lot of that problem now, but it's always that. And you typically have to speak to 15 different people in a large organization, and they all have to argue about why do you need this port and why do you need that URL, but again, you need it, just tell them to get over it. Really good top tip is to consider an AV VLAN. So Microsoft Teams rooms don't actually send any traffic over the LAN. Everything goes back and forth to the cloud. So unless you need to manage it locally on the LAN, poke a hole in it and have a jump box in your VLAN or something like that and do some stuff there, or use vendor tools to get onto the devices. But really consider an AV VLAN. If you're really that paranoid about the security of Teams rooms, which are really hardened devices and everything, stick it in its own little bubble like Cisco do, and poke a hole to the internet, and away you go. Proxies. Who loves proxies? Proxies are fun. Don't use one if you can get away with it, but if you do need to do it, you're going to have to use split tunneling for the media anyway because of all the encryption, unencryption malarkey, and it adds latency and a bunch of other crap. So talk them out of using it if you possibly can, but it's another thing to configure with all the IPs and FQDNs and all that kind of stuff. And then the other thing to remember is that MTR doesn't support authenticated proxy, which are quite popular these days. I prepared a few short URLs using my short URL, ucs.fyi. So if you do need to take a note of any of these, they'll go to somewhere useful, sometimes Microsoft Learn, sometimes a blog post, sometimes a video. So prepare network, everything you need to know about networking for MTR, and then the URLs and IPs. There are ways to cheat on the URLs and IPs to some extent because they do change quite a lot. You can get a JSON file, and if your firewall kind of supports that, you can ingest that in there, and it will dynamically change things as Microsoft update the list, which is kind of cool. So unless you have to type out all 7,000 of them, then you don't need to worry about it. Audio and video quality, so another really big consideration. So we talked about the room acoustics and all that kind of stuff. But we can get a little bit more deep into that. So Teams, just like Skype for Business and Link before that, uses optimized audio and video codecs. Microsoft, rather than using what everybody else used, they made up their own RT video, RT audio. Eventually they bought Skype just to get the Silk codec, and now there's this new one, which name escapes me. Somebody in the room will be able to tell me. Satin, there you go. So Microsoft tries to find a way to use the best codec to give you a good experience, even in poor networks, lossy networks, and all that kind of stuff. It'll send packets twice and do a bunch of stuff, but you need to help it where it can. If you are going to put your Teams rooms on your LAN, so Microsoft always said don't worry about QoS. Microsoft, Skype for Business, Link, whatever, will find a way. Again, help it out. So make sure that you protect that traffic and make sure that it's not being interfered with by the people that are downloading off the internet or doing naughty things. Seems like an obvious one, but put microphones where people are actually talking. I mean, I've got a microphone attached to my shirt. If I had it at the back of the room, there's no way you could probably hear me because I'm quite loud anyway, but the recording couldn't hear me, let's put it that way. So put microphones where people are actually talking, as close to the people as possible, as close to the mouths of the speakers. There are bars and things that have, sort of 7 meter, kind of 15-foot pickup and things, 20-foot pickup, 21, 25-foot pickup I've heard from some. Again, a really good acoustically treated room, that is definitely achievable. But when you have a challenging room or you've got noise overhead with air conditioning and things, maybe you want to go for specialist audio, but you want to, again, help out that thing and actually use microphones on the table in conjunction with the ones on the bar. And again, the specialist microphone thing. Who's been in a room with like noisy air conditioning or a rattling kind of air conditioning? It's horrible. Vendor audio can do a fairly good job, but generally speaking, you'll need specialist audio that has a recorded database of things to ignore, like noisy air conditioners. Use speakers that fill the room. We've got one big speaker up there, and it is filling the room. Hopefully you can hear me right at the back. Again, I'm quite loud anyway, so I'm helping it to some extent. But what I mean by filling the room evenly is if you've got a bar at the front with 1 million decibels, people at the front are going to be like deaf. Remember the old THX things when you went to watch a Star Wars movie and the Simpsons take on that with Grandpa Simpson? You don't want that kind of effect, have to turn it up really loud at the front just so that people at the back, right at the back of your 20-meter room can hear it. So for those kind of rooms, having a really loud speaker at the front doesn't make sense. Ceiling speakers where you can actually tune each individual speaker with the right output and things is probably your best bet. Use cameras with high-quality image sensors. Most cameras these days from all the vendors are 4K sensors and a bunch of stuff behind it to make it work. Teams, Zoom, doesn't really matter. They all use 1080 as a max. So why do we need 4K? Well, to give it the best chance possible. And if it has to crop it down or kind of scale it down to 1080, at least it's going to be better. Consider different camera framing options. So this wasn't a thing until probably, 5 years ago or something. Usually you just point a camera at the room and hope for the best. But people are a bit more demanding now. They want to see the people and get a bit more framing and things. So there's all kinds of different technologies. It doesn't matter what you use or what you call it. But group framing is probably the best kind of all-rounder. It will find the one person in the room and zoom in on them. If another person comes in, it'll zoom out and actually frame two people, and it'll adapt throughout the meeting to get the group to show the far end the best image possible. You've also got speaker tracking, and there's a new kind of kid on the block where you've got everybody gets their own tile and things like that. Every vendor has an iteration of that. And there's going to be some new accessories like the Logitech Sight. Neat have announced something, center of room, center of table cameras that actually work in conjunction with the camera at the front to, again, give everybody their own equity. Place the camera at eye height is the default recommendation where possible. Adam, I think you said it was 35 inches, something like that, thereabouts. You had a good top tip, find the tallest person and the shortest person in the company and average out their seated eye height and place the camera there. It's a good idea. There's some conflicting kind of things where maybe you've got a really long room, maybe it's a better idea to put the camera above to actually get an overhead shot. I don't know, I'll leave you to decide that. Whatever works for the room you're in, I think is really good. And then if you have center of table cameras and things, that overhead bowling alley shot is probably not a good idea anyway. Don't put it too high, you don't want it to look like a CCTV video. And again, short URL on Teams Quas. Security and compliance. Some of your favorite people to speak to. Their job is to stop you putting all this stuff in, right? They don't like any change. They don't like having to recertify things. Trying to get Android in a company that's all Windows and because they think Android is the devil is really challenging. But really, there's a couple of rules that I live by. It's an appliance. So just don't get in its way. Let it do its job. Rule 2, see Rule 1. Do not, for whatever reason, if you can, treat a Windows room like a PC. It's not going to have people surfing the internet and downloading crap and viruses and all this kind of stuff. The only interface is the touch console on the table. There's no mouse and keyboard connected to it. If they know the admin passwords, change the admin passwords so that they're more secret. The interface is join button, end. That's it. That's all they need to know. For an Android room, don't treat it like a mobile phone. It isn't. It's just not. It is Android, but it's barely Android. It's device administrator is what it's called, and it's a scaffolding for vendors like Logitech and Neat and everybody else to hang their own operating system over the top. It's barely Android. It doesn't help that Microsoft's own documentation calls device administrator legacy. People see that and think, ooh, don't want that. So everything's on Android. Teams phones, Teams panel, the touch consoles in some cases, the bars themselves, the boards, they're all Android. A good stealthy way to get Android into and past the security and compliance team is to start with the scheduling panel. It seems innocuous. It seems like something really easy. It's like, oh, well, I want scheduling on the outside of my room. Oh, it's Android. Oh, okay. Well, it doesn't do a lot, so I guess I can make that fly. They'll go through the documentation from the vendor, white papers, security stuff, and generally they can be convinced pretty simply and pretty easily. And then you go, oh, well, you know, you've got Android in your environment. Now consider Android Teams bars and things like that. So it's worked a couple of times. Don't install third-party antivirus and all that kind of thing. Defender's fine. The Pro license actually comes with Defender for endpoints. and it's actually being upgraded to do something else. You actually are in control of it in your own tenancy, so it's fine. Don't install monitoring agents, and really don't install anything you don't need to. There's some exceptions to that, so if there's software like Logitech Sync or anything like that's needed to make firmware changes or actually do settings on the devices that are connected to it, then you can install that. Software DSPs like Shure's and Telemix Room, that's an exception. And then there's the control software from the likes of Extron and QSC and things. Again, exceptions. There's a bit of shared responsibility there. So Microsoft really don't like any third-party things on the compute, but there's a bit of shared responsibility and support. Somebody has certified it between them and figured out whether it's going to work and not get in the way of Teams and Teams meetings. So hopefully it should work. Don't completely prevent updates. So there is a way to not be on the bleeding edge. If you just have it do its thing, the Windows rooms every night about 1:30 in the morning run a script. It goes out and finds all the Windows updates, all the driver updates from vendors that have put them on the Windows Store, and it updates the Teams app if there is one available. Does it automatically, and then it reboots. The next day, hopefully, fingers crossed, your room is ready to go. There's been a few cases where it hasn't actually worked out very well. You just get black screen when you walk in the morning, and you have to try and roll back, or the worst case, you have to re-image. So Microsoft are being a little more careful, hopefully, with the QA on their own code before they actually push it out. But if you want to control that yourself, as long as you buy the Pro license, you get the option to do rings in the Pro portal to actually delay updates, depending on, you can have different rings for different things. So you can have sacrificial lambs that get the updates as soon as possible, and hopefully they're okay, like a canary in a cage. And then right through to the exec where you don't want to update their room until the doors are starting to fall off. Android is also adding this, incidentally, in the Teams Admin Center to start with, and probably the Pro portal will catch up, where you'll be able to have automatic updates and then assign rings to actually do that automated update stuff. So a lot of that's changing. But I do have some examples of people that have completely prevented updates. And one day, two of customers from a previous job, between them they had, I think it was about 700 rooms, something like that between them. Not a huge amount, but again, if you knew who they were, you'd know they'd be screaming. All their rooms signed out one morning, and they couldn't sign back in for love nor money. Raised a case with Microsoft. Oh, you're on 4.2. Whatever, kind of, oh, that's from a year and a half ago. Oh yeah, that's in our custom PC build we have to put on these things. And we don't like updates because updates generally break stuff. Oh, right, okay. Well, actually, by not putting any updates on it, Microsoft have actually deprecated that version that you're on and basically move the line in the sand forward. You have to be on that version for it to work. So you basically kicked yourselves in the foot. So hastily, both companies had to rebuild an image, which brings me on to another point right at the bottom. Don't build a custom image. It's an image built by the OEM, and it's tested, and it's actually tested by a remarkable number of people. Adam here, he does the imaging and all the kind of the computes for Logitech, and all the SEs actually help him out and do testing on all these images. And there's probably about 50 other people in the business that do even more testing. So they do get tested well. And it's a hardened image anyway, based on Windows, IoT, and all that kind of stuff. So you don't need a custom image and have to be a control freak. And then back a step is don't force the major Windows builds. So I can't remember if it was 1909 or something like that, where it was actually possible to accidentally install it if you ticked a box. Long story short, all those PCs had to be re-imaged because it actually bricked them. The Teams app relies on a version of the Windows build. The Windows build relies on a version of the Teams app to actually get its thing. It's all built in now to actually stop updates. We're at 21H2, I think now. 22H2 will be out shortly. It's a little behind, but you don't have to worry about it. It's a hardened device. Again, see rule 1. And then some short URLs. Reiterating the rules. So do trust that Microsoft MTRs are secure by design. Whether it's Windows or Android, somebody has gone to great pains to make them secure. Do use Intune and conditional access support level security if you want to. Absolutely fine. You can actually secure and actually add security to the whole thing by putting things like conditional access. That account can only log in on that device in this location, that sort of thing. Port level security is another one. It's a really common thing for big kind of financial organizations where if you plug something into a network port, unless it knows what the device is, it's not going to get access to anything. Do set unchangeable, so these are ones where the user can't change it, complex passwords. And really, do you need to remember it after you've set it and logged into the device the first time? Probably not. If you need to log into it again, you need to remember the password, reset it, sign in, forget it. There you go. Microsoft did actually toy with the idea of password rotation. It didn't get a lot of traction in the TAP program for some reason, and therefore it got canned. But effectively what it was going to do is run a little service somewhere and actually talk to AD, change the password, set it, and log into the device again every 30 days, 60 days, whatever it was. Again, you'd never know the password, but again, you don't need to. Do use the Teams Admin Center, as bad as it is for Teams rooms, and the Pro Portal, and also use the vendor tools. So the TAC and the Pro Portal can do all the Teamsy things. The vendor tools are needed to adjust camera settings and things like that. So generally, you need both of them together. I've got a Empowering Cloud briefing on exactly that, all the different vendor tools. If you think you want a single pane of glass, none of them exist. Get over it. And again, just get out of the way, be a Teams room. You don't need to have all that control over the thing. It's designed to do one thing and one thing well. And if you get it in its way, it's not going to be able to do that job very well. And yeah, you're going to actually cause more problems. The room account creation, pretty simple one. Well, is it? The short URL goes to a blog post, which I'll be updating periodically as the things change. But create a room resource account, not a user account. Microsoft are actually, and if they haven't already, they're deprecating the ability for a user to log on to an MTR. So your execs that have a room in the corner or something like that of their big plush offices and stuff like that, they can't sign on to the MTR. They'll have to have another room account and then associate and actually just invite it to meetings as you need to, or use casting and all that sort of good stuff. Use the Pro license. Don't use Basic. Sorry for shouting, but don't use Basic. It's a horrible license. It doesn't have any features. The lack of features you can kind of forgive to some extent. It's single screen, and you can make and receive a Teams call and that kind of thing. But there's no ability to do any settings management, any updates. It doesn't include any of the Intune or Azure AD Premium P1, anything like that. None of those things are included. It doesn't include audio conferencing or phone system, or it doesn't include any of the cool things that you need. And Pro Portal is going to get good before long. So yeah, you'll miss out on all the ring management and stuff. I always like to create my accounts with some additional settings, little comfort settings. One of them is the mail tip. So the mail tip is when you invite the room or add the room to the invite, the Outlook invite, which I'll show you in a second, it brings up a little banner and says, you're inviting a Teams room, so make it a Teams meeting if you haven't already. And then just to reinforce that, you also get the ability to add some custom text to the acceptance email. So when it comes back to you as accepted, it'll say, this is a Teams room, so if you haven't already, make it a Teams meeting. Of course, now less necessary because by default, there's a tick box in Outlook and Outlook Online that makes every meeting an online meeting. I think it's by default. Get the calendar processing right. So there's a lot of calendar processing. Just copy the PowerShell that has all the falses and trues and things like that in the right place, and you'll be good. So for direct guest join in particular, there's a couple of parameters. If you don't set them right, you won't see a join button, so therefore you can't actually join. Everybody know what direct guest join is? That's the ability to join a Zoom or WebEx meeting from your Teams room. Set up the room finder. So if you've got one room, it's not going to be really hard to figure out what room that is and actually invite it to your meeting. But if you've got lots of rooms on every floor in a large building and a big campus, and lots of campuses across the country or across the world, you're going to need some sort of way to filter it and easily identify and find a room, unless you know the names of the rooms that you actually invite all the time.
Got a question back there.
Yeah.
Before I forget, direct guest join.
Yeah.
I've turned that, it's off by default, but it's easy to turn on.
Yep.
What have you heard in terms of when you can initiate screen sharing from the room into Zoom and WebEx?
Okay.
Currently you can receive, you
Yeah.
can't send.
So the question is, for a direct guest join, you can't share into a meeting. You can see content if somebody else shares. That may or may not be coming. Let's just put it that way. I've got an NDA with Microsoft, so I'll just say may or may not be coming. It's something they're thinking about. I don't know have any dates on when, but it'll come before long.
I mean, the workaround is you just tell the user to open up WebEx or Zoom on their laptop.
Yep, exactly.
Share.
Yeah. Configure the room equipment and location in set place. So set place is an exchange command that you can add loads of parameters like wheelchair accessible, but you can also add the address and location that help you find it in the room finder. But you can also add things like the equipment. So on your Teams panel outside the room, Microsoft have added one app. It's the Show Equipment app. That lists out the equipment in the room. So it might say, dual screen, or it has a scribe, or a content camera, has dual cameras, it has this, that, or the other. So you know that when you go to that room, or actually when you're inviting the room and you're filtering it, you're actually filtering it based on the criteria that you actually need for the room. So again, do the set place stuff.
Can you talk a little bit more about the room finder?
Yep.
What is that?
So I've got a slide on it. Yep. Create room lists for easy filtering. So, if you've got a campus or something like that, or a building or something, create a distribution list with a bunch of rooms from that location so that you're only filtering it based on that list. Pretty simple. Again, I've got a slide on that. Configure auto acceptance and add a delegate to process the conflicts. So there's a lot of companies that go, if you think about the old days of conferencing, you walk down a corridor, there'd be a front of house person, you say, right, can you book me a meeting room for Thursday? It's for 6 people. And they'll go away and do some stuff, and it's on a separate system or whatever. Well, actually, no, you can do it. Just go to Outlook and invite the room, dummy. The other thing is, you can set it to auto-accept. That's on by default, but you can have it not auto-accept and then go to somebody to actually do that, but why give someone else an extra job? What you do want to do, though, is add someone to process conflicts. So by default, it will decline a meeting if there's a conflict. If there's somebody that has ignored the scheduling thing and doesn't know that the room's busy when they want to have it, and they just invite it anyway, and they're going to get a decline. What you can do is actually make that a little bit more friendly, give someone else a little bit more work, but if the CEO wants that room and the minion has already booked it, who's going to win? So you need to have somebody that can process that thing, find the minion in another room in the basement somewhere where they belong, and then give the CEO that room that they want with a good wine fridge. Add a phone number. So Teams Rooms Pro comes with the audio conferencing license, and that gives you the ability in a meeting to dial a phone number and bring them into the meeting. That's all well and good. It also gives people the ability to dial in, if they're on the road and they can only get to a phone, that kind of thing. But if you add a phone number, voice routing policies, and all those sort of things, it's already got a Teams phone license. You can give it a phone number and actually give it the ability to make a call. So who wants a spider phone in a room when you've already got a device that's more than capable of doing it? Giving it a phone number means that reception can call the room while you're in there. Your guests are here, or your second guests are here or something, or would you like a sandwich or something? Or you can phone down to reception and request something. So one device, two purposes. And then the other one for direct guest join. So if you if you schedule as a WebEx or Zoom meeting actually on the website, you can add email addresses and send an invite directly from WebEx or Zoom. Of course, it's an external email address. It will make it to the mailbox, but they'll never process it and they'll never accept it unless you actually tick a box that says allow external meeting processing. I leave it up to you whether you want to allow that. There's probably ways to lock it down to specific domains and all that kind of stuff to, so that nobody else can invite the room if they know the email address. But yeah, consider that one as well. Meeting scheduling. There's no software needed, no special stuff. There's no complex systems, no spreadsheets or anything like that. You just use Outlook, right? So it's a standard meeting invite. You make it a Teams meeting, and the telemetry pops down the bottom. If you've already got that box ticked that makes every meeting a Teams meeting, it's going to put that there anyway. You can also schedule a meeting from Teams. It's a little hit and miss sometimes whether it finds email addresses and things, but it's getting a lot better. And also, there's the inline meeting options down the right, so you can actually tick boxes to record calls and do whatever else you need with lobbies and things like that. You can also do things like templates. So these are templates that you can set up so that they have all the tick boxes ticked for a specific type of meeting. So I've got one for podcast recording because not once but twice I actually did, well, once was an entire episode without recording it. And I do my podcast on Teams with some friends of mine sitting at home and whatever. Got through the whole thing, great discussion. Fuck, I stopped recording or didn't record it. So we had to do it again. And the other one was, I didn't record until about 10 minutes in, something like that. But thankfully the first 10 minutes were waffle, and I just had to record a statement from somebody to kind of top and tail it. So now I just have a template that ticks all the boxes that I need, and when I schedule it with a template, and it's automatically recorded. Use a room finder. So that's that little button there in Outlook. That brings up a little sidebar. So the sidebar, you can have kind of a room list. So that's that distribution list that has the room filtering. You can specify the capacity, the floor you want to be on, also location, and you can even choose features. Does it need to be wheelchair accessible? Does it have to have a beanbag? I don't know where I got that image, but yeah. Does it have audio? Well, hopefully. And again, if you do the filtered list, you can filter it by location, and you go down to even the meeting room floor, depending on all the complexity of the stuff that you've actually added behind it. It's a really good idea, really good tool.
Does this integrate with other partners like AppSpace that's doing kind of the modern office, and they've got like floors?
Yeah, when you configure AppSpace to talk to M365 and Teams and Exchange and everything else, you can actually import all the rooms. Don't think you can import the DLs and things like that, but you can create lists yourself there as well. I haven't tried it with the lists, the AppSpace integration, but it's a good question. And of course, you can just go to the scheduling assistant and filter things there and try and find it by name and just add the room if you already know the name. Integration with other systems and platforms. We talked about it a little bit. So Teams rooms can use direct guest join to join a Zoom and WebEx meeting. Microsoft has also announced, was it GoToMeeting and someone else? Huh? And BlueJeans, that's it, yeah. They announced it about 3 years ago or something, so we've all been holding our breath, of course. But when you configure everything properly and all that kind of stuff, again, you just get a meeting invite with a tile with the Zoom logo or the WebEx logo, and of course, if you got the parameters correct, you get a join button. If you don't, you get 3 little dots, and it's no bueno. It's a cut-down experience. It uses WebRTC. It's not just a web page or a web kind of version of it. It's kind of still been developed with Zoom or WebEx and Microsoft to give you that kind of consistent experience. It's pretty good if you just want to join a meeting. And again, we talked about you can't share content. That will probably come. I don't know when, but that's Microsoft trying to make sure that you don't have the excuse to use BYOD. So next one there is, if you do need to share in, You could plug in your laptop and join the Zoom meeting and drive the thing from there, but if you're going to join from your laptop anyway, you might as well just plug in via BYOD, borrow the camera, mic, and speakers from the room, drive the whole thing from your laptop, and be done. But Microsoft don't want you to do that, so they want to make the WebRTC kind of direct guest join experience better and better and better over time. And just, lessen those excuses.
Is the workflow there, you get a meeting invite from another company that uses Zoom?
Yep.
Comes to me, it's Joseph, and
Yep.
then
You forward it to the room, yeah.
forward it to the room email.
Yep. Yeah. Or if you're, because a lot of companies are migrating from Zoom or WebEx, or they'll have a coexistence of those two to Teams, so they'll still use the vendor tools to actually schedule those WebEx and Zoom meetings, and they're using a web page. They can invite using an email address there, and of course, as I said, if you don't have external processing available, it ain't gonna get in. Management monitoring, Teams Admin Center. It's not great. I'm glad Jamie's not here. It's kind of hit and miss. The things I hate the most are configuration profiles for Android rooms. It was basically just a clone of what they did for Teams phones with a couple of other things. They only get assigned when you assign the profile. They don't actually sit there and wait for you to sign into the room again and just go, "Ooh, I've got a profile. I'll just ingest all the settings." So all of it's dumb. But what you get in Teams Admin Center, you get health, basic alerts. Again, another one that really kind of chaps my hide. You can decide whether the screen going off is a critical thing or not, or whatever. But again, it's still pretty basic. You get some pretty good usage stats and that sort of thing. So if you want to know if your rooms are used and stuff, then you can get at that. Device logs, settings for Windows rooms, and then firmware updates and stuff like that, and some ring management coming to Android. So this is kind of diving into a room. You can tell I'm a sci-fi geek. All my rooms are named sci-fi ships and planets and people and things like that. So Dagobah is my Windows room, and those are the peripherals that are plugged into it. You can also get some real-time stats. So you can kind of go in after the fact and try and get into troubleshooting. Luke's got a session on this later on that's going to go into this in a big way, and all the troubleshooting stuff. So a bit more high level for mine. But you can actually go in real time, actually see what's going on with codecs and all that kind of stuff. You can even now, there's a new feature where you can say for the CEO's meetings, they have to be rock solid. You can tick a box to say that you can get at some real-time telemetry, and it'll actually start to report things like, with the MOS score drops or jitter or something like that. So it's pretty cool. Pro Portal. So I've had the Pro Portal for a number of years now. And it's just got better and better and better over time. You get some major announcements and stuff there. You used to have some people behind the scenes actually doing support on your rooms, but now that's gone. Now they've gone from the premium license to the pro license, but again, it's still a good portal. You can get at the same settings you can in the Teams Admin Center. There's the update rings. There's also some really cool, some reports on usage and utilization and stuff like that. Which is really cool. You can get at the health data, the history, and even things like your least reliable rooms, and go and target them and do some stuff to them. And then you can even say over the last however many days, how utilized has it been, how healthy has it been, that sort of thing. So again, pretty good level of stuff from the Pro Portal, a lot more than you get in the Teams Admin Center. And of course, this is the update ring thing, so you can create different rings and it'll tell you all the updates that have happened, not just on the Teams Rooms application, so 4.16.40 is the latest one that's out, but there's also some firmware for devices and things like that, as long as the vendor publishes them to the App Store. And then you can add rings to decide who gets what. And then, of course, you got the vendor pro tools and things like that. So, as I said, for Teams Admin Center and Pro Portal, you can do team settings. You have to go to the vendor tools to actually get at the, the things like camera settings and framing and reverberation gain and all kinds of other stuff. Really cool things. So you'll need those anyway, more than likely. User adoption change management. I'm not a user adoption or change management specialist, but it's just a few things that I've picked up over the years. So it's about making sure that the people that you want to use the rooms will actually use them, and you're not getting kind of resistance to that change. It's critical when you're moving from one thing to another, because obviously you can hold their hand and whatever, but you want to teach them how to fish so they can fish forever. And that's pretty much it. That's the adoption side of things. There's a lot more to it. I'm sure there's an adoption session here. If there isn't, there's tons of stuff recorded online about Teams adoption, and of course there's a URL there for that. And then the other one, another big top tip is, all that adoption and training, which is the next bit, is, you don't know whether it's successful unless you can measure it over time. So have little milestones after every month or every quarter or whatever it is. You can actually have it give you stats on how many more people are actually using the technology, that sort of thing. So pretty simple stuff, but it can be very complex, but definitely something you shouldn't ignore. Change management. So it's not just at the start of the project you need to worry about change. Teams is completely 100% evergreen. There's 11,000 features added to Teams every week, and the pace of change is absolutely relentless. But, I mean, sometimes in a good way, but it's really hard to keep up with all that. But there's the message center, which, how many here use the message center? About half, okay. So use the message center. It gives you, it's actually context-based, so based on stuff you have configured, devices you have installed, things like that, it will pop up messages that are critical to you. So you're getting a little filtering out of the noise, and you can filter it even further. So I'm only interested in Teams, so I'm just going to get the Teams things there. And just go and review it. Things in the message center get updated frequently as well. But yeah, you need to be prepared for this change so you can prepare the users for the change, because when Microsoft moves a button from here to here or hides the share button inside the more button just so they can have Cortana on the screen, it's a stupid idea. But they did it, and you had to XML to kind of configure it out, and the users didn't like it.
Where is this message center?
At the M365 admin center in, it's like services or something like that, about halfway down, 3/4 of the way down, something like that. It's just called Message Center. You can also use Planner to assign a project manager and actually take these messages, put them into Planner tiles and things, so that somebody is responsible for those changes. So if you don't want to go to the Message Center, and if you don't want to give the rights to just some planner or change manager or something like that to the admin center, then use Planner and actually publish the stuff there. And again, assign project managers. If it's a big enough, a significant enough change, like moving a button or changing the behavior completely, people need to be warned about it and prepared.
Is that a canned workflow already?
Yep.
Okay.
Tick a couple of boxes, next, finish. What was this? Yeah, it's the Planner thing. So dashboards and a bunch of other really cool things. Share the impactful updates with timelines. Critical. And don't forget to change your training material every time Microsoft changes a logo or the name of something, or the layout, or Teams Rooms on Windows now looks like Android, so there's a lot of copying and pasting and screenshots being done there to redo all your training material. There's a lot of change. And then training. So training is showing them how to use it, and then where to get help critically. So I would say they're designed to be simple. As I said, you walk in, you've invited the room, so hopefully it's on the display, you press join and you're in. It can't be much harder than that, but there's a few things in here and there. Showing them things like casting. Who here uses casting? 3, 4, okay. Try it. It actually works remarkably well. There's only one caveat, so if you bring in an external guest, they have to follow a little workflow. I've got a video on it, on caching the email address of the room so that when they hit the cast button in their Teams client, it will actually find that room. It uses Bluetooth beaconing to kind of identify the room, see whether it's busy, and then it starts a meet now on the room, and then it's kind of a three-way thing between your laptop, the room, and the cloud. Really, really cool. Similar to proximity join, but I think a little bit easier. Yeah, consider intranets and how-to guides, but again, just be aware that everything changes a lot. So be prepared to change things. Don't print things out. Yeah, make them intranet-based or some sort of online portal, that kind of thing.
You don't recommend having like the nice directions right in the room so people are like...
Yeah, company I used to work for started putting a QR code actually on the backdrop of the Windows Teams room front of room display, and that actually just gets them to an intranet or something, or a portal where you can actually request help or actually ask for a sandwich or something like that. So yeah, some useful stuff you can actually get there if you really want to try it. In-person training can work really well, but again, if you're in a big company, it can be kind of prohibitive. Try drop-in sessions, don't make it mandated or anything like that, and try videos where you can, or just video training. There's all kinds of things where you can share your screens and do content capture and stuff to bring the screen of your MTR in it. Just look at the videos from people with YouTube channels like mine. I just use little tips and tricks to try and bring the screen in so I'm not actually pointing a camera at the screen, and it actually makes it pretty good. Create a product champion, so somebody that knows a lot more than the average bear, and somebody that identifies themselves as that product champion, so that admin and IT don't get inundated with questions about how do you join a meeting. Ask the product champion. Microsoft, of course, has resources. There's a little help button down the bottom left of the Teams desktop client. There's also a short URL that takes you to a nice little help file that has videos and screenshots and a bunch of other stuff. Of course, Microsoft haven't updated the imagery with the new thing. And then I think we're getting toward the end. Yeah, we've got a couple more slides. That's it. One more slide. I think this is it. So reporting. So this is from the Pro Portal, and this is on utilization. So this is filtered out the last year. Not a particularly busy tenant. These are all my demo rooms and things like that. So there's not a lot of. I actually do attend a lot of meetings. I actually test all the devices at least a couple of times a week for the tap process to make sure everything's good. But you get some really good reports out of that. How many scheduled meetings, the call performance, that sort of thing. Some good graphs. And you can export some of it as well. How is one room performing next to a nearby room or next to some nearby rooms? And if it's low, why is it low? And we won't tell you why it's low, but you can ask the users that have actually scheduled meetings in there and go, why don't you use that one very often? And they'll say, because at 2 o'clock every day the sun comes in and blinds everybody, or it gets really hot, or the air conditioning's broken, or the other ones have a better fridge with stocked full of stuff. Consider third-party tools. There's some vendors out there that have some third-party tools that get at some additional reports and stuff like that. And there's even some reports on Power BI. So shameless plug for Logitech. So the Insights dashboard gives you some really good stats on not just whether it's a Teams meeting. So because there's a camera, it's counting and tracking people. If somebody goes in there, there's a meeting happening. So it'll tell you which ones are which. And then the Power BI stuff. There is another report specifically on rooms. I think it was one of the MVPs actually built it. I couldn't find a link for it. I'll try and find a link and put a link in here if I can. But it was really, really good, specifically about rooms and room utilization. And that's it, with a minute to spare. That's why I asked you to ask questions along the way, because I knew I'd waffle. Anything else for the last minute?
I'm actually genuinely curious about the difference between Teams Room Pro and Logitech C.
Well, they're two different things. Yeah, so Teams Room Pro Portal is, again, it's about getting at the settings for Teams and Microsoft land, right? The Logitech Sync or Neat Pulse, which is coming out soon, those are about actually vendor settings. What framing options do you want? how aggressive do you want the echo cancellation, those kind of things. You can't set those in the Teams Admin Center of ProPortal because Microsoft doesn't have a way, an API to actually get at those things. And conversely, you can't get it from the vendor tools and actually get at it. That's why you consider some third parties that will use a mix of Graph and PowerShell and a bunch of other stuff to cheat.
And I have customers that say it's really just a health check and that's all I need, so I can
Yep.
just go right
Yeah.
to ProPortal and not use third-party stuff.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Coolio. Anyone else? Marvelous. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you very much.